This is a series about an artistic era that's been misunderstood for centuries. An era so controversial, historians can't even agree on what to call it. Some refuse to use the old name entirely. But I'm going to use it, because it perfectly captures the paradox we're about to explore. I'm calling it the Dark Ages.
And here's what you need to know from the start: everything you've been taught about this period is wrong. This wasn't an age of darkness. This was an age of astonishing light.
The Dark Ages span roughly 7 centuries, from the 4th century to the 11th. They begin when the Roman Empire, the greatest power the world had ever seen, starts its slow collapse. They end when William the Conqueror invades England in 1066. In between, everything changed. The certainties of Roman civilization melted away, and powerful new artistic forces stepped forward to fill the void. Later, we'll examine those much misunderstood creatives, the barbarians. What wondrous objects they brought into the world, what fabulous things they achieved. We'll also look at Islam, that joyous and inventive religion which did so much to illuminate these supposedly dark centuries. But we're beginning with a group whose achievements were truly staggering. They started with nothing, absolutely nothing, and ended up transforming the visual language of the entire Western world. I'm talking about those thoroughly underestimated Dark Age creatives, those intrepid voyagers into the unknown, the Christians.
Because art never lies. And the story that art tells us of these exciting times proves beyond doubt that this was never an age of darkness.
We're going to uncover secret codes hidden in plain sight across the Roman Empire, the shocking truth about what Jesus actually looked like in early art, how Christianity stole its most sacred imagery from pagan gods, and the invention of the church building itself. Stay until the end, because the final revelation about the Lindisfarne Gospels changes everything you think you know about British art.
Pompeii. Those famous ruins, frozen in time when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, covering everything in ash and preserving it perfectly for posterity. Among the discoveries that truly surprised archaeologists was proof that Christians were already living here by 79 AD. Just decades after Christ's death.
And what proved it? A mysterious puzzle called the Rotas Square.
These Rotas Squares have been found all over the Roman Empire. In Syria. In Gaul. Even in Britain, in Cirencesta. They're usually inscribed on the walls of houses, or sometimes on columns outside. And when archaeologists first found them, they had absolutely no idea what they were looking at. Just mysterious word games plastered outside houses. What it is a letter square made up of 5 Latin words: rotas, opera, tenet, arepo, and satyr. Look closely and you'll see something remarkable. Rotas at the top is satyr spelled backwards. You can see rotas down one side and satyr down the other. And in the middle, arepo is opera spelled backwards. The actual words translate roughly as ye sow, so shall you reap. But only if you completely ignore Latin grammar. For decades, codebreakers twisted this puzzle every which way, but it still didn't reveal much.
Then came the eureka moment. One brilliant codebreaker realized that the important thing about the Rotas Square wasn't the words at all. It was the letters. Because these letters can be rearranged to form a cross that reads the same both ways, up and down. And it says Pater Noster, Latin for Our Father, the opening words of the Lord's Prayer.
Even more remarkably, the 2 letters left over are A and O, Alpha and Omega, the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet. In the Roman catacombs, you see Alpha and Omega everywhere. The beginning and the end. Popular Christian code for the one true God.
So these mysterious word squares were placed outside houses to signify that the occupants were Christians. And they also served as a kind of lucky charm to ward off evil. Now, this isn't art yet. This is an inscription. But it has profound artistic implications. What you see here, this appetite for signs and symbols and secret meanings, this Christian hunger for the cryptic, transferred directly into Christian art. The Christian art of the Dark Ages became an art of mystery and magic, of suggestions and miracles, of transcendence, of light. The Rotas Square isn't art yet, but it's an excellent pointer to a completely new artistic direction. One reason early Christian art is so exciting is because you find it in the most exciting places. Rome is wild enough on the surface, but when you descend into its underground, into the catacombs, you enter a world that's both scary and utterly fascinating. People often imagine the catacombs were hiding places, underground shelters where persecuted Christians hid from the Romans. But that's a myth. You can't hide an underground city this massive under anyone's nose. The Romans knew these tunnels were here. What they didn't know was what one Christian was saying to another down here in the darkness.
Because the first Christian art was absolutely filled with secret signs and hidden meanings.
That's why the fish became such a ubiquitous Christian symbol. When two Christians met on the road, tradition says one would draw this curve in the sand, and the other would complete it with another curve. And immediately, both knew they were Christians together. The fish is made by combining two Greek letters, chi and rho, the first two letters of Christos, meaning the anointed one. The sign was said to have magic powers. Even today, we still write Christmas as Christmas because of this ancient symbol. Another popular Christian sign was the anchor. For the simple reason that the top of it resembles a cross. Everywhere you look in these haunting Roman catacombs, the first Christians are declaring their faith in mysterious and cryptic ways. But these symbols and signs weren't just a secret language. They represented a completely different way of seeing things, a different way of understanding reality, not just with your eyes but with your imagination, with your soul. What's most interesting about this first Christian art you find in the catacombs is how few actual pictures there are. No images of Jesus. No Mary. No saints. For the first few centuries of Christianity, there were virtually no Christian images at all. It's not until the beginning of our period, the so-called Dark Ages, 300 years after the birth of Christ, that figures and scenes finally begin to appear in Christian art. And look how puzzling they were. We're in a 3rd century Christian burial chamber in the catacombs of Priscilla. A wealthy Christian family was buried here. And the walls are covered with cryptic imagery. Over here, some peacocks. Over there, 3 men standing in flames. And here, some kind of sea dragon with someone emerging from its mouth. The peacocks are symbols of eternity. Because peacocks replace their beautiful feathers every year, the ancients believed their flesh couldn't rot. It was eternal, imperishable. The 3 young men are described in the Bible by the prophet Daniel. 3 young Israelites were thrown into a furnace by the Babylonians, but God protected them, and the Babylonian fires couldn't touch them. The man coming out of the sea monster is the prophet Jonah, who, as you may remember, was swallowed by a whale for 3 whole days. After 3 days, the whale spat him out, and he returned to dry land a wiser man. The thread uniting all these cryptic images is salvation. Hope. God saved the 3 young men from the fire. He saved Jonah from the whale. He'll save you too. Jonah is also the subject of the earliest surviving masterpieces of Christian sculpture, found today in the Cleveland Museum of Art. Jonah swallowed by the whale. Spat out by the whale. Returned to dry land a wiser man. Jesus, remember, also rose from the dead after 3 days. The reason Jonah is so popular in the catacombs is because he's a way of showing Jesus without actually showing Jesus. A replacement. Another code. A symbol.
Think about this. We've been examining these catacombs for just minutes, and look how many different ways we've already seen to represent Jesus without actually depicting him. He's the Chiro word sign. He's Jonah in the whale. He's the fish. The anchor.
What we haven't seen yet is a Jesus we can all recognize. A Jesus who actually looks like Jesus. The truth is, no one in early Christian art had any idea what he actually looked like. The Bible doesn't describe his appearance. No one does. So art took an extraordinarily long time to come up with a face for Jesus. And I believe the search for that face is the greatest artistic struggle of the Dark Ages.
But this is where the story takes a turn that shocks most people. Because the face Christians eventually chose for Jesus wasn't invented at all. It was stolen. And from whom they stole it will completely change how you see every religious painting you've ever encountered.
The proof that no one actually knew what Jesus looked like is a controversial relic, the Shroud of Turin. It's said to be the cloth in which Jesus was wrapped at his death. This haunting image is supposedly the true face of Christ, preserved miraculously in his blood. The Shroud of Turin doesn't get displayed often, but when it does, thousands of pilgrims flock to Turin to see it. Most of them absolutely believe they're looking at the true face of Christ. When I went to see it, the atmosphere in the church was overwhelming. So many people, so certain they were staring at the actual remains of Jesus.
But I'm afraid they weren't. Because Jesus Christ didn't look like that. At least not according to the evidence left behind by the first Christian artists who depicted him.
According to these first Christian artists, Jesus actually looked like this: blonde, fresh-faced, boyish. The earliest images of Jesus look nothing like the Jesus we know today. And nothing like the bearded figure on the Turin shroud. Jesus at first is a happy-go-lucky character. Curly-haired and handsome. He's usually shown waving his wand about, performing remarkable miracles. Here he is turning water into wine at the wedding feast at Cana. Here he's curing the paralytic who couldn't walk until he met this baby-faced Jesus. Over here, the blind man is being cured by Jesus. And finally, with a wave of that Harry Potter wand of his, Jesus is raising Lazarus from the dead. You can always identify Lazarus in early Christian art because he looks like an Egyptian mummy, all wrapped up. What you never see in these very first examples of Christian art is a Jesus who's suffering. In pain. Covered in blood like the figure on the Turin shroud.
That Jesus doesn't turn up in art for another 1,000 years or so. Because the tortured Jesus is a creation of the Middle Ages, an expression of medieval guilt and terror. What horrible pains the artistic mind went on to inflict on the crucified Jesus in the centuries ahead. How harshly it whipped him and scourged him and punctured him.
But in the beginning, artists didn't do that. The first Jesus in art is young and handsome, curly-haired and free.
So either Jesus deliberately misled his followers about what he actually looked like for the first 1,000 years of Christianity, or the Turin shroud is a medieval fake. I know what I think.
The first Christians weren't looking for a God who made them feel guilty. That would never have caught on. They were looking for a God who would save them and fill them with hope. So where did the model for the first Jesus come from?
Christian artists selected the youngest and handsomest of the pagan gods. They chose Apollo, the god of the sun. Blonde and unbearded. Youthful and curly-haired. Apollo was a god who made you feel good. So the first images of Jesus were curly-haired and pretty because they borrowed that look directly from Apollo.
And it went even further than that. When a mysterious Christian statue was dug up from the ground, it was initially thought to represent a woman, an unknown goddess, perhaps a muse. Only later was it realized that this too was an early Jesus.
In that wonderful museum in Cleveland, the one with the Jonah marbles, there's a carving of Apollo performing a miracle with Nike, the goddess of victory. Apollo is the robed figure, and look how shapely he is. How easily we might mistake him for a woman. Pagan gods could be male and female. They could amalgamate the sexes and represent both genders at once. Just like this Jesus here. Extraordinary as it sounds, the first images of Jesus were sometimes deliberately made to look feminine. They were given suggestions of breasts, beautiful faces, soft bodies, and long hair. There is neither male nor female, wrote St. Paul to the Galatians. You are all one in Jesus. The pagans had lots of goddesses to worship. Venus, Isis, Diana. But Christianity had none. Christianity believed in one true God, and he was masculine. There was an entire feminine side missing from the religion. So the feminization of Jesus was a deliberate artistic attempt to cater for both sexes. It produced some of the Dark Age's most unexpected imagery. In Ravenna, in the magnificent Arian baptistry, there's an unbearded Jesus being baptized in the River Jordan. And he's so soft and feminine, so delicate, with childbearing hips. Before this girlish Jesus could become fully masculine, grow a beard and turn into a man, Christianity needed to find a feminine presence of its own. The borrowing of Christ's face from Apollo shouldn't really surprise us. The early Christians borrowed from the pagans because that's what art does. It uses what's already there. It's important to remember that for most of these early centuries of Christianity, Christians and pagans lived together in reasonable harmony. Those terrible periods of persecution, when the Romans murdered Christians in horrific ways, those were rare. The exception, not the rule. Later, when the Roman Empire became officially Christian under the Emperor Constantine, aggressive Christian writers looking back on these times did what the victor always does in a war. They rewrote history from their point of view. Dramatized it. Exaggerated it. In most of the Roman Empire, particularly at the borders like in Roman Syria, pagans lived next door to Christians. Christians lived next door to Jews. And all of them muddled along together. The earliest known Christian church has been found in the Syrian border town of Dura Europos. It was next door to the earliest known synagogue. Around the corner was the temple of the bull god Mithras. All these different religions swapped converts, borrowed each other's gods, and influenced each other's art. The halo, that miraculous circle of light you see around the heads of holy figures in Christian art, where did that come from? At first, there were no halos. Jesus was the magician with the wand, and that was enough to differentiate him. But as Christian art grew busier and more characters appeared, Jesus needed to look more obviously divine.
So Christian artists did what the pagans did. They gave him a halo. Borrowed once again from Apollo. Long before Jesus acquired his miraculous nimbus of light, Apollo already had one. A circle of symbolic sunshine emanating from his head to signify his solar divinity.
Another crucial borrowing from the pagans was the image of the angel. Look at a typical Roman sarcophagus from the early Christian era, and you'll usually see a pair of winged figures carrying a portrait of the deceased upward in glory. They look exactly like angels, but they're not. They're Roman figures of victory, Nikes, pagan transporters of the soul. But the most significant of these pagan borrowings was a female figure adapted from Egyptian art. She became extraordinarily popular in Christianity. Indeed, she became central to it. But that's not how she began.
Now, this next part is crucial, because it explains how Christianity finally solved its biggest artistic problem. The solution they found didn't just change religious art. It changed the entire Western artistic tradition forever.
The Egyptian Earth Mother Isis was one of the most revered of all pagan gods. She was the goddess of fertility, the mother goddess from whom all life originally sprang. When you wanted babies, you prayed to Isis. When you wanted your crops to grow, you prayed to Isis. Whoever you were, slave, servant, outcast, you prayed to Isis, because Isis would protect you. To emphasize her caring nature, Isis was often shown with a baby on her knee, whom she breastfeeds tenderly. He's Horus, son of Isis. Horus was the god of the sky, the Egyptian Apollo. And his birthday fell at the winter solstice, sometime around December the 25th.
When Christian art grew hungry for a distinct female presence to worship, a mother goddess who nurtured and protected you, Isis, the mother of Horus, was an obvious model. And the two of them were soon successfully transported into Christian art.
This is the first known image of Mary holding the baby Jesus on her lap, found in the Roman catacombs of Priscilla. A touching fragment of a mother and her child. Mary caring for the baby Jesus became one of the most popular of all Christian images of the Dark Ages, with such glorious results. This great artistic discovery of the Virgin Mary had an important byproduct. Because it did away with the need to feminize or soften Jesus. When Mary emerged as a powerful divine presence, Jesus no longer needed to be girlish. His image was free to become fully masculine. But where to put all this powerful new art that Christianity was inventing? It's all very well finding new images for Jesus and Mary, but what also needed to be invented was the Christian church itself. The Roman Empire was vast. It stretched from the Middle East at one end to a primitive cultural backwater at the other, the place we now call Britain. When you're imagining the Roman Empire, you need to stop thinking about countries, because there weren't any. No clear divisions between Asia and Africa and Europe. All of them were part of this massive collar of power surrounding the entire Mediterranean. The mightiest empire the world had seen. Christianity reached Britain quite early, traveling all the way from the eastern Mediterranean to the far western edge of the empire. In a village in Dorset called Hinton St. Mary, archaeologists dug up one of the earliest mosaic images of Jesus. He looks stately, doesn't he? More like a Roman senator than a Christian god, except for the large chiro surrounding his head. The sign of Christ. This is Lullingstone in Kent. We're here to see what's left of one of the earliest known Christian churches. If you're thinking this looks more like the remains of a big house than a church, you'd be absolutely right. The first churches were ordinary houses adapted for Christian use. Some Christians were wealthier and more active in the community than others, and their house became the neighborhood house church. The house church found in Dura Europos, the one next door to the Jewish synagogue, was just a small townhouse where Christians had done some DIY. Knocked down a wall, roofed over a courtyard to create more space for their meetings. On the walls of this makeshift church, the Dura Christians painted Christ walking on water. And there he is again, healing a cripple, making him walk. Here in Lullingstone, the house church was on the first floor of this elegant Roman villa, just above a pagan shrine. Basically, it was a simple room with painted walls. Decorating it was a procession of praying Christians with crosses on their robes. There was also a chiro, and around it the two momentous letters of the Greek alphabet again, Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end.
If you put all four letters together, Alpha, Rho, Chi, and Omega, you get the word Arco, which means I rule.
From the outside, you wouldn't have known the Lullingstone House Church was there. It was a modest Christian conversion, almost invisible. And for the first 300 years, all churches were like this. Humble spaces in people's houses. Just a bit of DIY where Christians could worship and celebrate. And then, in 313 AD, Constantine the Great converted to Christianity. And everything changed.
Suddenly, this cryptic and secretive religion with its instinctive fondness for codes and clues became the official religion of the Roman Empire. And modesty was no longer an option.
Constantine the Great. Roman Emperor. Mighty warrior. Defender of the faith. Constantine's mother, Saint Helena, was a Christian, and he probably inherited the faith from her. In 313 AD, Constantine's famous Edict of Milan made Christianity legal in the Roman Empire. From then on, its power grew exponentially. Constantine was a builder by instinct. Look at the magnificent triumphal arch he placed in front of the Colosseum. But his greatest achievement as a builder was the unexpected invention of the Christian church as we know it. Until Constantine, Christian churches were small and makeshift, often hidden away. But when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Emperor, everything changed. Suddenly, all the building resources of the mightiest empire the world had seen began to be lavished on Christian architecture. A religion that had made do with small house churches found itself having to invent a brand new style of worship. These huge Christian basilicas that Constantine began building were another Christian achievement for which there was absolutely no precedent. The little house churches were useless as examples for these giant halls of worship. This was a completely new kind of architecture. This is Santa Sabina in Rome, the best preserved of the first Christian basilicas. It's a completely new type of religious space. No one in any religion had worshipped like this before. Pagan temples worked very differently from a Christian church. Pagan temples were spaces for worshipping outdoors. In a pagan temple, the congregation stayed outside. Only the priests of the cult could enter the holy sanctuary where the sacred idol was kept. Christian churches were the opposite. A Christian church was a huge assembly hall with a roof where people could worship indoors. And the style of worship was different too. Nowadays, churches have neat rows of pews where everybody sits quietly and piously. But in the first Christian churches, there were no pews. In the beginning, Christian churches were huge open spaces where an ecstatic Christian crowd would kneel and circulate. This was a space for moving and chanting and talking.
At the start of the ceremony, the priests would enter in a magnificent procession that traveled all the way up to the front. You see them illustrated sometimes on Christian walls, the entire priesthood progressing through these new naves in a magnificent wave of finery and color.
These were spaces full of constant movement and chaotic crowding. The only precedent for such a building was a useful Roman construction called a basilica. Basilicas were public meeting halls built to house large crowds. There was nothing religious about them. Every sizable Roman settlement had a basilica. Roman basilicas were entered from the side. But when Christians took over the shape, they swiveled it around and put the entrance at one end, so the entire building pointed in one direction. One of the common uses of a Roman basilica was as a law court. The populace would mill about at one end while the magistrate would sit at the other, raised on a magisterial throne, sitting in a special rounded apse that signaled his importance. The Christians took over the magistrate's apse as well. That's where they put their sacrificial altar. And above it, a great apse mosaic, the climactic moment of this magnificent religious journey. But look up at this glorious apse mosaic and you might think, there's Jesus with a big beard. What happened to the curly-haired boy? Well, he just wasn't grand enough for Constantine's new basilicas. The early Christians wanted a god they could look up to, a god who was a match for all the other gods. When the time came for a more imposing Jesus to emerge, Jesus the adult, the Christians turned once again to that reliable source of raw materials that lay all around them, the art of the pagans. The most powerful and important of all the Roman gods was Jupiter, or in his Greek incarnation, Zeus, king of the gods. Zeus, or Jupiter, was grand and bearded. In the great temple of Zeus at Olympia, the most famous sculptor of the classical age, Phidias, had shown the king of the gods enthroned in majesty.
An image the Christians were determined to match. They took it all. The beard. The hair. The throne. That sense of omnipotent power. It was all borrowed from Zeus.
And the curly-haired youth with the girlish body who buzzed around performing miracles was replaced by this manly, mature Jesus who sits in judgment on his flock. Stern and unsmiling. Wise and infallible. Now we need to jump forward several centuries to see how this Christian artistic revolution continued to unfold. Because the story of the Dark Ages is far from over. In the Lindisfarne Gospels, one of the masterpieces of Dark Age art, you see a scene of Julius's house. It's shown in the middle, a posh fortified villa. Those domes at the back are the bathhouses, the equivalent today of a luxury swimming pool. All around the villa are busy scenes of rural life in North Africa. On the left is winter. See the people picking olives? That's what you did in winter. On the other side, on the right, is summer. See the shepherds with their summer flock and those fields of ripe wheat behind them? Down here, spring and autumn. Spring is the season of flowers. And there's Matthew writing his gospel. It says Matthew, right above him. All the portraits here are rather traditional. They could easily be Italian or Byzantine.
But then you turn the pages and you come across this. And this certainly isn't traditional or Italian. This is a uniquely British contribution to the art of the Dark Ages. Look at all this amazing Celtic interweaving filling all the letters. All these cosmic swirls and spirals. It's like a magnificent garden of paradise that's erupted across the pages. And yet it's got this pagan kick to it as well.
This is St. John, the writer of the fourth Gospel. That's his portrait. And there above his head, the eagle. That's his sign, just so we know who it is. And this is the actual beginning of John's Gospel. Look how astonishingly beautiful it is. And you know what this says? What all this amazingly complicated interlacing in cosmic calligraphy says. It says, in principio erat verbum, et verbum erat apud Deum. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God.
In the Lindisfarne Gospels, Christian energy and Celtic inventiveness, pictures and letters, have come together in cosmic adulation of the Word.
So that's the story of the Dark Ages. They weren't dark at all. The Christians' struggle to imagine their God was one of the most exciting struggles in art. The barbarians were inventive people who made glorious objects of stunning beauty. Islam spent these years reaching for the stars, making revolutionary advances in mathematics, astronomy, and art. The Anglo-Saxons were magnificent goldsmiths and brilliant wordsmiths. When William the Conqueror invaded Britain in 1066 and brought the Dark Ages to some sort of official end, he brought to a close one of the great ages of art. An age that was never dark. An age that blazed with creativity, innovation, and light.
The so-called Dark Ages were actually a period of spectacular artistic achievement. From the secret symbols in the Roman catacombs to the magnificent basilicas of Constantine. From the borrowed imagery of pagan gods transformed into Christian iconography to the stunning illuminated manuscripts of medieval monasteries.
This was an era when Western art reinvented itself completely. When artists working with almost nothing, guided only by faith and imagination, created a visual language that still speaks to us today. The next time you walk into a church, look up at that bearded Jesus in the apse, that halo around Mary's head, that angel with borrowed wings. And ask yourself, are you looking at Christian art, or are you looking at the greatest act of artistic theft in human history?